1. Most of us have heard of Marcus Aurelius. Many of us have read Seneca. A few have wrestled with Epictetus. But almost nobody talks about the man without whom none of those names might mean anything at all. A philosopher from a small city on the southern coast of what is now Turkey, who arrived in Athens as an outsider, inherited a school teetering on the edge of irrelevance, and then, through sheer intellectual force, rebuilt it into a system sturdy enough to survive 2,000 years. His name was Chrysippus of Soli. And the question worth sitting with today is not just who he was, but what his story teaches us about showing up for something larger than yourself, especially when the odds look bad and no one is watching. Think about the modern version of that pressure for a moment. You inherit a project, a team, a relationship, a habit someone else started, and it is already fraying. The original energy is gone. The founding vision is fading. People are drifting toward newer, louder alternatives. And you have to decide, do you walk away, or do you stay and do the work that preservation actually requires? That is not a romantic question, it is a practical one. And Chrysippus answered it with his entire life. The work he chose was not visible or celebrated in the way founding something new might be. It was quieter, harder, and in many ways more demanding, because it required him to hold together what already existed while making it genuinely better. According to the historical record, Chrysippus was born in Soli in Cilicia and moved to Athens as a young man. He became a student of Cleanthes, who was himself a student of Zeno of Citium, the founder of the Stoic school. When Cleanthes died around 230 BC, Chrysippus became the third head of the school. He was not the founder, he was not the charismatic originator, he was the third, the inheritor of an inherited tradition. And yet the historical record gave him a title that neither Zeno nor Cleanthes received, the Second Founder of Stoicism. That title is not accidental, it reflects something documented and specific. Chrysippus did not merely pass on what he was given. He expanded the fundamental doctrines of the school, built an original system of propositional logic, and engaged seriously with ethics, physics, and the theory of knowledge. He was, by the account of those who studied this period, a prolific writer who made the Stoic framework more rigorous, more coherent, and more defensible against its critics. Here is the core teaching that runs through his work, and it is one the source material captures precisely. Chrysippus adhered to a fatalistic view of fate, but nevertheless sought a role for personal agency in thought and action. Read that again slowly, because it contains the central tension of Stoic philosophy, and if you sit with it, the central tension of being a thoughtful adult in any era. The world constrains us. Events happen that we did not choose and cannot reverse. People disappoint us, institutions fail, circumstances narrow our options. And yet, even inside those constraints, something remains ours. The quality of our attention, the direction of our effort, the choices we make about what to engage with and how. That is not a motivational slogan. It is a carefully constructed philosophical position that Chrysippus spent his life defending and refining. The logic he developed was not abstract decoration. It was a tool for understanding how the universe operates and where, within that operation, genuine human choice still lives. Why is this hard? Because fate and agency feel like opposites. When something genuinely bad happens, it can feel dishonest, even insulting, to be told that your response is what matters. Grief is real. Injustice is real. Circumstances genuinely do limit what is possible. Chrysippus was not naive about this. His ethics, as the record describes them, depended on understanding the nature of the universe, not escaping it or pretending it is gentler than it is. The Stoic framework he built was designed for people living inside difficulty, not people who had already transcended it. The honest acknowledgement here is that holding fatalism and agency together without collapsing into either passive resignation or frantic over-control is genuinely difficult work. It requires repeated practice, not a single insight. Most days you will feel the pull of one extreme or the other. That is not a failure of understanding, it is the condition the practice is designed for. So what does that practice actually look like? In the morning, before the day makes its demands, take 90 seconds to name one thing you cannot control today. Not to complain about it, but to acknowledge it clearly, the way a navigator acknowledges the weather before setting a course. Then name one thing you can genuinely influence: your attention, your preparation, your tone in a hard conversation. That pairing is not positive thinking. It is a direct application of the distinction Chrysippus built his entire system around. In the middle of the day, when something goes sideways, pause before reacting. The passions that Chrysippus described, the ones he called unruly, the ones that depress and crush the soul, do not wait politely. They arrive fast and loud. The practice is not to suppress them, but to examine the judgment underneath them. When you feel the spike of anger or dread, ask, what am I treating as fixed right now that might actually be changeable? What am I treating as changeable that is in fact beyond my reach? That one question asked honestly does not eliminate the emotion, but it changes what you do with it. In the evening, spend 2 minutes reviewing not what happened, but how you engaged with what was yours to control. Not a self-criticism session, not a gratitude list, but a quiet factual audit. Where did you act from judgment? Where did you get swept along? The point is not guilt, the point is calibration. Over time, that calibration is what shifts behavior more reliably than any single moment of inspiration. What changes over time with this kind of repeated practice is not that hard things stop being hard. It is that the gap between event and response gradually widens, not because you become invulnerable, but because you have rehearsed the distinction so many times that it becomes available to you under pressure. That is what Chrysippus was building, not a philosophy for comfortable days, but a framework sturdy enough to use when the school was faltering, when the critics were circling, when the original founders were gone. The transformation is incremental and honest. You will still be caught off guard. You will still react before you think, but slightly less often, and the recovery becomes quicker. Zoom out for a moment. Chrysippus built something that outlasted him by centuries. Not because he was the most famous, not because he founded the movement, but because he did the structural work that preservation requires. He understood that ideas, like institutions, like relationships, like disciplines, require someone willing to do the less visible work of making them coherent, rigorous, and transmissible. There is a version of that obligation in your own life. The habits you maintain when no one is rewarding you for them. The thinking you do carefully when sloppy thinking would be easier. The commitments you honor when the original enthusiasm has faded and only the choice remains. Chrysippus made that choice again and again, not in a single heroic moment, but across a working life. That is the mechanism the historical record actually shows us. The soul of what Chrysippus taught, as described in the record, was a therapy of extirpating the unruly passions that depress and crush the soul. That word, therapy, is worth sitting with. It is not conquest, it is not suppression, it is a form of tending, the way a garden requires not the elimination of weather, but repeated, attentive response to whatever the weather brings. Chrysippus arrived in Athens as an outsider, inherited a tradition at a fragile moment, and chose to build rather than coast. The second founding of Stoicism was not a dramatic reversal. It was accumulated, deliberate work, the kind that rarely gets named in the first sentence of any story, but often turns out to be what made the story possible at all. What in your life right now is waiting for that kind of attention? Not a grand gesture, but the quiet, consequential work of someone who understood the difference between what can be changed and what cannot, and chose to act precisely within that distinction. Stoicism: master your judgments, practice what is yours to control,